Welcome to another video. I'm kind of returning to my roots with this one and carving a medium relief wildlife scene out of a 2-inch piece of pine. I believe my last detailed relief carving was the family farm, so I'm long overdue for another one. With this one, I didn't really base the design off anything, and there's nothing too crazy technical with it. Probably the most difficult element of the carving is the scaling and carving the distant objects appropriately. After first layering the carving, I established the ground plane that tapers back towards the deepest layer in the distance. I was careful here to be consistent with my strokes and not carve too deep, because then I'd be chasing that depth as I go. I then roughed in the closer trees and tent. Using gouges, I blocked out the trees to create some depth within the leaves. I followed with the Dremel to create the leaf texture. Just due to the design and the incorporation of a lot of foliage, I used my Rotary tool quite a bit throughout the carve. I actually broke my Dremel in the middle of the project and had to buy a new one. It definitely came in handy though, and allowed me to really hone in on the details and texturing. I turned to my hand tools though as I carved the tent. I needed those crisp, hard lines to establish the look that I believe only the gouges could create. I added a little character to the tent by carving in some ripples to the sides and front of the tent wall, making it look like it's maybe blowing in the wind or the stakes aren't perfectly tight. The fire pit was fun to carve and I think really completed the scene. I was actually thinking about incorporating a pulsing LED light under the logs to make it look like there was a fire lit, but I decided against it. I didn't want to complicate the carving too much. I shaped the rocks and logs with my very small gouges, and I carved in the bark texture with my Rotary tool. After the fire pit was carved, I shaped the larger boulders, and I roughed out the larger tree to the right. I applied the same technique as earlier by blocking it out with gouges to establish depth, then going over the same areas again with the Rotary tool to create the desired texture. When carving this tree on the right here, I actually originally had no intentions of carving completely behind the branch. I have never attempted a complete undercut like it before, so as I was carving, I realized it was a great opportunity to try. I just took my time and tried not to apply too much pressure on that branch so it doesn't break. I believe that this next stage of the carving is probably the most crucial in getting right. If the water or distant trees don't look properly scaled, it's really going to affect the overall appearance of the carving. With the water, I wanted to have gentle waves, and I found it difficult to properly scale back the waves as they go further into the distance. I used a lot of sanding to achieve the look I wanted. The distant trees, I made sure I didn't have any aggressive textures, and I scaled down the depth quite a bit compared to the closer trees. I sanded as well to tone it down a bit. This carving was so enjoyable to create. Like I mentioned earlier, there wasn't anything fairly new or too technical, so I could just freely carve and not really worry too much about a particular area. The water and distance scaling was on my mind, but I just slowly worked through them in the moment, and I'm really pleased with the result. With these carvings, I oftentimes find myself constantly finding ways to add more detail Initially, I was going to keep the hills in the background fairly simple and plain, but I decided to test my luck and go for a mountain look. I added the final touches by carving in a small rock texture near the shore and around the campfire. I then carved in a grass texture near the tent and surrounding area. My final challenge was the border. I wanted to create a unique but simple border, and I wanted to incorporate a light somehow to highlight the carving's depths. After a lot of trial and error, I created my favorite design so far.